Handwritten, it's started as an investigation and like a question for me. We were in the beginning of the pandemic, and I read a text by Pope Seattle called The Loser's Conspiracy. And the text is about a love letter that was never delivered because of the pandemic. And that made me start thinking about the relationships and this sort of like digitalization of relationships and culture we were living throughout the pandemic. And also all of the unanswered questions that we had about it, because I believe it was like around March 2020. And also I was starting to be interested in virtual reality, and in a more formal way, I was started to think what an essay or an author film will be in virtual reality. So I think all of these inspirations and questions were gave me the first insights to start thinking about this project. People usually say that if it's not meant to be virtual reality, don't do in virtual reality. And I think when it comes to this project, it sort of like applies, because I wanted to depict this mental image and this state of claustrophobia that the pandemic and the quarantine had in all of us. So I believe using some specificities of virtual reality, like this immersion and being inside of the film literally, I believe it helped conveying this sort of like state, spiritual and emotional state that I wanted to make the spectator feel. So Handwritten is a 3DOF project. It's a 360 film. So the level of interaction that the user has inside of this, in this entire process of the film, is the framing and where they look. But I believe this plays an important role on understanding the film, because Handwritten is sort of like a film collage. So we use all different kinds of footage, from 360 video to flat video and animations, and everything inside of the film is placed in like all around the 360 space. So the interaction of gazing where the user wants to gaze, it is sort of how this interaction is done. But even though it's a video, the fact that the user can make their own journey throughout the film, I believe it plays an important role on it. So I came from film. I have a film background, so virtual reality was something new to me, and I believe the process of building the film, it was very experimental. It was getting used to and learning to use 360 film, and more than that, not only using the video, 360 video, but building it from flat films and other kinds of footage. So it was a very experimental process. I believe I had a few versions, because it was I was doing things in a very unconventional way, in a very experimental way, to put together this video collage inside of this virtual space. But it all started with looking at the medium. Like, I was interested primarily in the medium and what could be done with it. If I wanted to take the specificities of outdoor cinema and film essays and try to translate them to virtual reality. So using, let's say, this sort of subjectivity and reflexivity from the author in this process of thinking, building a process of thinking using the film and looking at the medium. So this was important to me. In doing this in a medium that I've never worked before, it was a process of trial and error to see how things were given the impression that I wanted to give. Like, if the flat videos were too close or too far, and how were they blending together. So this process, the struggle was to understand, first of all, understand the medium, and second of all, understand if what I was trying to achieve using it was effective or not. If it was just something, I wanted to go beyond the technology. I wanted people to look at this as if it was an essay film, and if they could, I don't know, in a way absorb the process of constructing this process of thinking together. And I believe to achieve this, I had to, experiment a little bit with all kinds of materials I was using. This is a very, the VR being cinema or being part of the cinema is still something a bit polemic. We have like a few filmmakers that are very traditionalist and they're like, VR is not cinema, and at the same time we have the VR community saying that 360, for example, is not VR. So I believe now we're in this process of understanding what things could be, but I'm very optimistic about it. I believe what we're trying to do right now with VR is something that filmmakers were trying to do using video in the 60s and the 70s. So I believe this process of getting the medium and making the most out of it is something that we are experiencing. And I believe this notion of cinema is way broader than just like a film screen in a movie theater, you know, like throughout the development of cinema, this form of cinema that became hegemonic is just one of them. But if we think like the cinema of attractions and the expanded cinema, all kinds of cinema, I believe virtual reality, it's pretty much, it makes sense inside of this. If we think about Andrea Bazin, the myth of the total cinema, virtual reality is pretty much what he was describing, you know, like this cinema that is, you're inside of the frame and you're able to look whatever you like. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about it. I see virtual reality as not the cinema, but as cinema. And I believe right now we can do the most out of it, leaving the labels a little bit aside and paying attention to the medium, to the content, and to what we mean with it. And I believe there's a gap between the audiences from cinema and virtual reality. And I believe once we sort of like build this bridge, because filmmakers are very used to think about mediums and how we can experiment with it and in a way revolutionize the medium. Once cinema people look at VR, I believe we're going to be able to do some very amazing things.